Julie here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Mars hour Saturn day, Mars Aldebaran. Mars Aldebaran and the Moon is 17 degrees Gemini. Midheaven with Neptune. And ascendant 17 degrees Cancer applying to the Sun. Well, Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde in Cancer gives us relational eurekas. Moon in Gemini is also a sign of communication. The question regarding duplication. And Mercury ruling over Uranus, Sedna, and Mars Aldebaran is accentuating a material win that is not to be a Pyrrhus win. Now, in the Epstein-like societies, there was a significant amount of effort and crimes against humanity towards infants, that some of them are now business people, politicians, big important people, people that their name is on the resources of the world. And a lot of that work was done to get them to believe that being a winner is being evil. Because that makes them always susceptible to lose land. They can win significant amount of lands, but it's going to be a Pyrrhus win. Okay, think Israel in 67, Moshe Dayan. Amazing war strategy. Thinking about living with the Arabs and not above them. Conquering land and all frontiers. But he was not exempt from the MK Ultra violation of the male sexuality first and foremost. We saw it through the fact that he raped women. He raped a lot of women, but he raped also a lot of boys. And it's the less discussed thing. Israel lost. Not only Israel lost a significant amount of this land in 1973, 67 was the 67 led to 73, and 73 was the point where people talked about not just 67 occupation, but 48. Before that, it was very difficult to get a Q1 article published criticizing Israel in any political sociology related academic paper. And this I know from Professor Niv Gordon, whom I learned with on my second degree. I had a lot of criticism towards him around the Me Too, because to me it was the litmus test. And yeah, his wife is a feminist, and they would share responsibility over the kids, and the kids would be there with. They would go to an Arab Jewish school, but on the money, when there was the Me Too, because the core issue is honoring the feminine. We will not have peace without honoring the feminine. Just like if I'm going to overwork myself, I'm going to get sick. I'm going to get sick with one of those diseases that are related to not honoring the feminine, because that means that I'm an abusive man towards myself. Now, going a little bit forward, the type of people that trigger people the most is not the women that say, "Oh, I don't want to have children." No, it's a woman that says, "I don't know. For me to be able to access that choice, I need to have the world supportive of life energy, of orgasmic birthing, of being able to say yes and no, and maybe to one another throughout every encounter, being able to live separately, being able to live together happily. Okay, being able so that none of us would be psychiatrically, psychologically, societally, or spiritually tagged. Even when that's not the case, even when we are angry or mad at each other, doesn't work with MK Ultra, doesn't work with MK often, doesn't work with the type of society that forces very young children to be exposed to horrible content. At the very least, they're not just exposed to horrible content, it's way worse things. People are not triggered by, and I say people, it's men and women. It's not just like, oh, men are triggered by women. That no, 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 no. The women are triggered no less than the men by a person to say, oh, I don't want to have a partner. I live my own life. I don't want to have a partner. What triggers them is, I need to see the world supportive of happy relations. I need to see the world supportive of not just single people, but love itself. Not as unhappily but stuck together people. Not as people that just were a joint or arranged marriage, and then they were like, oh, we're going to make the best of this, and so on and so forth. Now, here's the thing. People tend to idealize this. Yeah. When I worked with Frat Wolfson, there were a lot of questions about this, and I said, wait a second. There is the practice that is embodied regarding sexuality. I don't know if somebody is with the right person. They gotta be able to have body, heart, mind, and soul alignment with that person, man or woman. I'm not the person to be able to tell. Even when I approached synastry and astrology, I approached it as possible red flags or possible challenges in a synastry and composite. If I think about my most difficult synastries and composites around my Pluto square, they had to do with orgasmic birthing instead of the other types of traits. They had to do with body, heart, mind, and soul alignment instead of courtesan, cartesan division. They had to do with honoring the inner child, the toddler self, and addressing the effect of weird rituals around infants. They had to do with the economy being compatible for love that is actually loving. And understanding as half Dutch, and people can laugh all they want about whether I'm biological child, not biological child. Families have all their weirdness. Naturally, whenever somebody is growing to be significant as I am, naturally, the shadow work that I had to do means that everybody around me at the closest level had to deal with that friction. So, and naturally, it means that there are a lot of probably attempts to try to harvest um, on whatever frictions or shadow works people could be facing. But it's a half dodge to say that anything that markets itself as sex work is not just human trafficking, it's toddler rape, because it would be possible to traffic these people without them being harmed as infants. Okay, that's a from the core change. When it's my own awareness. People are, and you know what? Intelligences, they're comfortable with people saying, oh, drop the Peter ring, off with their heads, and so on and so forth, because they can do a move that supports them at their time to cash in on the extortion cult. When somebody addresses the creation of a child sex offender, the intricacies around, while not holding, while not enabling the people are happy with eat the rich, tax the rich. They're triggered at the elite sends their children to training where only some of the children, some of the elite children, come back alive. And then we ask them to not confiscate our homeschooling. And people are happy to say, well, it's their choice. They chose to be like that. They're this, they're that. They're triggered. They're triggered. And when I say triggered, it means that people forgot, dissociated from what made them make that leap out. And then, whoop, it's that level of trigger. So, is of course the gift of grace towards the fact that people are being triggered on the core things, is beyond the horrible things. But it's triggering when people say, wait a second, it's the circumstances of being violated to that degree without ability to exit that cause it the susceptibility to mind control, that cause it one to be victim and perpetrator. People are okay with people that say they have revived memory from something that was dissociated. They're triggered by those who connect consciously the things structurally. People are okay with people saying, oh, that billionaire, that person, that, yeah, they were on the Epstein list. They are triggered by a person who says, structurally, we need to abolish from the core the generation of extortion cult, which is the generation of pedo rings and the generation of pedophiles and children that are offended, which means that the children are harmed before that billionaire. Because structurally, we currently do not have a situation where a person could be a billionaire without growing in those contexts. Um, and that's the scary thing, because now people have to look not only at their hated, so that person is a commie, so that person is saying that that person is a commie. It's kind of like, well, it's something fundamental. People are okay with people to say, oh, that book and this book are like Mein Kampf, meaning with certain type of testament. They are triggered when we say That component in that book was human trafficking component. We never had a book where the man and or the woman, maybe I would need to look at Shiva and Shakti, but we never had something where they're not controlled, subjugated, in domestic violence relations, or exiled. Today I woke up thinking, wait a second, was Eve's issue that she was basically um, dating an abusive man, and then that triggered that the minute she tried to be sexual with an abusive man. But Eve had no way to know that he was an abusive man. It wasn't like Lilith was there to say, "Hey, I know that materia." She couldn't have known. People are okay with people pointing out the red flags of an abusive partner. They are triggered when the discussion that that abusive partner was probably born into exactly the type of places that were made to make men, basically business people, people that are winner in life, people that are in position of power, which means a say over resource. Okay, if you want to have a family, you need to have some sort of environment to have that family. And you need to have the soil to nourish the children, even with the naturally growing herbs. You need to have that soil safe. So one of the things, the core things, is to not have domestic violence. That, by the way, that would be the antidote. Can, yeah, but to say that, well, in those societies, since children, they were growing into violence towards even their loved ones. Yeah. Now, take into account that not all of these things are conscious, meaning they were tortured through loss of consciousness. You're married not a husband, but a group of people that are like a hive mind, but not a healthy hive mind. There's nothing wrong with a hive mind. But a group of people that are ritually abused. I guess there is this one. Thank you. And none of them actually has the correct advice. Where you're entering a world where the imitation of happy relations, of thriving, successful relations, was a bait for either an undercover. And by the way, when there's actual genuine love, eventually somebody's going to know. Eventually there are going to be the questions, there are going to be the probing questions, because somebody's not getting into certain. Because they're not going to go, oh, this person was narcissist, not suffice. Narcissism is a relational trauma that can be even so much as a child's sexual trauma. Now, here is another thing that people are triggered by. Men, for example, I remember that was a situation where I saw a man saying, yes, it's that single or solitary rapist or murderer and so on, and he was angry. But they're triggered when we tend to the secret and abolishing that, also regarding the esoterics, the rites of passage, the the every single thing in the book. The effect on business, on weapon trade. But the effect on weapon trade is the generation of wars over nothing. Israel, in its less than Uranus cycle, less than one Uranus cycle, less than 80 years, saw a trauma where peace relations, even an attempt to peace relations, ends as political assassination. In a democratic regime, by a candidate that would anyway lose the elections. With the Intifada, he was about to lose the elections anyway. The point was not to take the reins over a decision that was made undemocratically and so on and so forth. Should there have been a referendum? Probably. But we don't need to assassinate a prime minister, not even a president. Okay, way more decentralized regime, and not a bipartisan. Okay. Now, why did Rabin didn't make it? He did not confront the rapes of Moshe Dayan. If he would, by the way, we could have been in 67 borders with Arabs having Palestinians having blue ID, being happy. Why? If we abolish rape, if we abolish the issues that cause it, and if we don't see ourselves as above others, then people care. Palestine, a lot of Palestinian people, they wanted the blue ID, they wanted to live not at peace with Israel, they wanted to live a good life. They're business people. You know who's the most hated person in Palestine? No, out of both Israel and Palestine, not Hamas, not um, not Bibi Netanyahu. Who owns the estate in Rabat? Now here's the drama. I don't even know. Oh, they had a water issue, water this, water that. We can make water from the air. Solar panels, water from the air. The Bedouins did that. And by the way, after they did that, they began to settle land on land per person, not having more land if they have more wives. And that killed polygamy. By the way, the women, there were a lot of women that were against that because they needed to have a husband. But it was horrible for the children, and it was forcing women to have children, which means that the children and the education system, in the beginning, they would beat the children. I had the honor to have been approached by a person that wanted to change that, and I assisted him with only 3 meetings that he applied. Big shout out to Charlie from Charisma on Command. I bought back then his course and applied the tips from Charisma on Command, together with gamification. I was an English teacher, so I was surprised that somebody would contact me for that. I was like, okay, let's see what I can do. That person applied things that I couldn't and became the favorite English teacher without beating the children. That was not a Pyrrhus wing. Then he said, "Oh, I can develop that, and I can go and do schools." And I was like, "Yeah, he can refine that with his own." But when a person have an in praxis, it means that they are going to develop a lot of things that from the background one. Am I deserving of dividends? Well, also Charlie from Charisma on Command will be deserving of dividends, and also whoever came up with gamification. But what we need to make sure for that schooling to not be confiscated, we need to make sure that the elite will stand their ground when it comes to sending their children, having only some of them coming back. And they say, but surely they are mind controlled. Well, the points of interferences to address that are already there. There are essential oils that are connected with balancing the hemispheres, the right-left hemisphere. Let me go back to my own books. There's a certain type of walking which is kind of like, it's basically walking on the line of infinity that I learned in my second aromatherapy course, which is about balancing the hemispheres. And I understand that if that information was given to me, I was one of the people that needed that. Again, it doesn't have to be a full-blown what people see, but the things that affect toddlers. And by the way, later they tried again, and I was severely tortured and so on. But I think I have aborted a certain political assassination. And here's the thing, the core issue was that I already knew that sexual boundary violation causes inflammation. And only then I saw that insisting on that is preventing political assassination. And then people say, but the White House saw that I'm right. Then, of course, people say, well, I'm not afraid of death, I'm not that. But we do need the, how should I say that? We do, think about it in 67 relations. Okay? If you're going to do, let's say you're a military alliance, if you're going to do the 67 thing, for example, with Africa, joining all the countries to NATO, you don't want to end up in a 73 thing. For that, you need to abolish the dishonoring of the feminine. Even if you're BlackRock, Larry Fink was having a conversation. Larry Fink was having a conversation with Elon Musk, and I was thinking, Larry Fink, the WHO, because it was in the context of World Economic Forum, Elon Musk, Melania Trump, Donald Trump, even myself, yes, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, nearly all of us almost certainly have Naval Moon Nakshatra karmic rope. How come all these people get along? Now, it is loss of ideas, housing, and children. I don't know. And indeed, the core issues, and also Epstein and Mark Dutroux. And by the way, also, I think also P. Diddy, Jay-Z, and Beyonce. Now, is it? I'm not gonna say right now. I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait for some. Now, what is the core of the karmic rope of Moon Nakshatra? Is basically an issue of the moon. The moon is not well nourished. There is a reversal in the roles with the, let's say, the emotional safety. And this interferes with the eroticism. I had it also with people around me. And this means that what? It interferes with what? A home, a nation, people. It interferes with children and their upbringing. Um, Now here, people are okay with people saying, kind of like more redundant things. They're triggered when somebody points at the core structural issue, because it was basically the beginning of weddings at puberty. In the extortion cult, very young women had children, or that the woman always had to be okay with the husband being the Onassis. The Onassis suffered from that a lot. With the husband being in a society that entails sexual boundary violation. And by the way, Melania Trump giving her husband the it's over, and she's a woman that stands by her man, and she's very much a stand-up woman and a woman that stands by her man at the same time. It is the equivalent of JFK having his speech in 1963. But nobody would notice that, because it seems to be like, oh, those are women issues. Those are scandals issues. Those are. Now, so people say, oh, what about you, Shirley, that you mentioned that Stormy Daniels was tortured? And she didn't know what she was getting into, because she didn't have the way out. And she was not tortured by Donald Trump. It's not unlikely that Donald Trump was going through certain things so that they would create I say, yeah, this is bad and JFK. I agree with you. And the women are also triggered. For example, a single woman triggers married women because she's still, it's kind of like, why is she still choosing? Is it something wrong? They have to say that there's something wrong, more so than with a married woman. Or as a single, by the way, a single man as well. Oh, he's a pedo, he's a this, he's a that, all the other ones aren't. um, or people are triggered by the woman that doesn't have children. And eventually they can come to somehow dreadfully accept it when it's the woman that chose to have, I don't know, peaceful meditations over over raising a kid. It's the woman that doesn't know, but the world needs to be compatible for orgasmic birthing, compatible for relations with good upbringing, compatible in terms of the soil, in terms of the housing, in terms of the life, a meaningful life, so that the children will be able to travel and experience life, not as pubs and drugs, but as, and then they're going to see life here, they're going to see life there. It can't be in a sense like, oh, these people are having, here people are living terrible life. Yes, because mommy and daddy did economic hitmanship in this country, and that's why you have scholarship tuition for Ivy League, because they expect us to donate after not just to pay for school, but also to donate after after and, and then try to make it okay, but the child will be dissociated from the time that the child is raped and tortured to participate in Ivy League. It's a part of the fraternities and sororities. Oh my God. Why? Because we have the power, we have the decision. And then we ask, well, when the child will work, they will have money. Yes, of course. What is the job? Okay? And when a woman doesn't say, oh, I prefer to do meditations rather than growing a kid, or, oh, I can't afford financially to grow a kid, the economy needs to change for you to even be able to afford yourself. That is where people get. Also, people are dreadfully okay with a person saying, oh, I'm gay, or I'm not binary, or even I'm not sure about my gender. They're triggered when a person say, wait a second, but these extortion calls that they tried to get the children to sleep with both, which affected the access to the original sexuality, and then when they try to permeate the personality of person, so they can't even access being safe. If nobody can access being safe in their feminine, they can't be safe in their masculine either. And that doesn't work with treason cults. Treason cults is not about cheating, it's about people being obligated to betray in order to participate in or do something that is called irreversible. Even people are okay with people saying, yeah, the mafia, they were like this, they were like that, they were like that, 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 that. And I'll say, when people say, wait a second, the whole concept of an organization or order that people cannot sway from and does not contain life, love that is actually loving. The trafficking basically negates life at an infant level. The excessive drinking of alcohol is on the basis of that very violation. So it's not about them not being hard workers. It's also not about them not being the government, because they are. Since Gladio, they are. It's about, well, if their governance needs to support life. Okay? Life does not mean, people living in fear is not life. Are those easy questions? No, they're not easy questions. It's very, and also people are okay with saying, oh, this is the richest man in the world. He controls all the resources of this continent, but he doesn't have love. They are okay. They're triggered when one points to, well, they have to operate within a set of oligarchy and eventually concentrated the wealth of the people that weren't better people under their ruler, their regime. They were also not exempt from the extortion cult, energies related to the energy and banking companies of other countries. Well, if you think about the fall of the Tsar, it had to do with the same pitfall. They had to be overpowering because their environment was not really orgasmic birthing supportive. And yet the challenge to change, to take that power and change the infrastructure from the core to support something that will allow them to let go and have that written in the sand of time. Have that sustainable, have that not something, for example, in between the Soviet Union and the aftermath regime, there were a lot of, thanks Elvira, a lot of grassroots movements. People began to do all kind of social initiatives and so on and so forth, but that didn't hold water. How does one change the structure so that it does hold water? It's the gnosis of the 6-9, of the bigger sun, of orgasmic birthing, with the teaching and supportive of orgasmic birthing for every individual. Now, if we think about, shout out to Emma from Mspiracy, and I love it when the people begin to talk about their own lineages, because there is, of course, a tension between infrastructure companies and the monarchies. And while the monarchies definitely have their own shadow work, it's also the notion that that the targeting of certain bloodlines was, so John D. Rockefeller, for example, could say, oh, well, that's what we could extort them on, okay, which is basically what we see today as Epstein dossiers or Rolodex or Detru dossiers, and the fact that there were operations that since childhood, or the schools, we talk about the Rockefeller schools for the common people, what about the elite that got people only having some of their children returning, and then the trauma bonds. So neither of them changed that to actually happy, thriving, sovereign people. Now, one could say, oh, how could Rockefeller bring something that he didn't have? Best argument ever. Um, and some people might say, oh, Shirley, that I need to reply to you. Yes, you understand I leave a half-finished sentence. um, Bless you. Now here is the thing. Should I say that or should Annika Lucas say that? Well, Annika Lucas talked about particularly Rockefeller because that's the experience she had as a child. She said she was by them. She wasn't raped by him, but he had other people to do it. Now, horrible as it may sound to not rape Annika Lucas, he basically needed to be somewhat sovereign in the face of and he knew that would be an extortion, so he had to make that he had to maintain the smugness of the offenders and to maintain that being illegal at the same time. Now, it's sad to think why is pedophilia illegal? Not because people acknowledge the fact that it does genuinely harm development, fertility, our life choices, and so on. Even when the pedophiles are not sadistic. And you say, how come not? It means that they're not aware that this is, but also the sadistic one is not fully aware always. It's just that as a child, that was the game, that was the fun. It, what does a child understand from having to do this or having to do that? Adult points there and they have an elated feeling because they're winning something. Okay, all the gamification points are turned upside down. And this is how they learn that they are exempt from the rules and thus are free. And it plays on rules. And then they're supposed to think that a body, heart, mind, and soul alignment, love that is actually loving, that is self-trust, that brings trust in relations, that is actually satisfying life, legacy, and vision, that is the rules that they don't like. Now, that the inherent part of that, which is not having the safe and secure attachment and relaxed arousal, honoring child self, and sometimes, the levels they would have intermittent levels of deprivation and overwhelming, so that they would be love bombed but never loved in a way that's actually loving. That creates an erotification and addictive pattern, which will never yield sovereignty. And this is how we get, think about United States national debt. And this is why people are triggered when, having suffering from the result of hypersexuality following rape or sexual avoidance doesn't mean sexual liberation. And what people called whore or slut is basically a raped infant. And by the way, also what people called rapist. Now, because it's a question of agency, and agency is perceived as power, then there's the liar paradox when it comes to the offenders. Now, since the children were placed there to basically extort, but also assassin, then people begin to equate sex and death. over nothing. And since when the person is violated, they become in their animal brain, then animals, the child helpless self, and power became equated psychoerotically. When a Pluto Scorpio speaks. This is also how we see that the negation of that does necessitate connection to the soil, to the natural growing herbs, to the oils that are made of the soil that rots and has time to compost, which is patchouli, also vetiver, but mainly patchouli. Vetiver, I think, still enlivens. Patchouli really aligns. Now, of course, when a person goes from avoidant or even dissociated from their sexuality, the oscillation part necessitates something like patchouli, necessitates something like standing on fertile soil, eating from the natural growing herbs. Per person, and it necessitates that the access to those things will not be through perpetuating the violence. Oh, wait a second. The core issue of that violence was basically wealth consolidation and natural resources. It's not the land. It's the right to mine the land. It's the right to do something with the land. Why? Because these people are the land rejuvenators. And then when people start to do projects, they say, oh, wait a second. Oh, if we take the slopes towards the Dead Sea and we build little dams, then we stop the flood and we build half moons around them, then we revive the area. Or we always send out beavers, which is, they're not rodents. Now, oh, they're going to drill in the same method they drilled in Estonia with the oil, with standard oil. Oh, okay. But it doesn't negate. I mean, we can still avoid the flood. It's still a touristic area. Will it be? I mean, it's just the most touristic area in the world for minerals and salt lakes. That is the lowest point in the earth where people come to treat their skin disease. Now, what skin disease is the boundary between the inner and the outer. Sandalwood. The environment being supportive and nourishing. This is also why we anoint our skin and not just eat healthy. I learned that in my Saturn maturation. The previous generation learned about the factor of reducing stress for a healthy skin. Now, of course, the sense of self, which is Mars, and with Saturn-Mars combinations, is vital to have healthy skin. People that were violated have stress and have permeability to the sense of self. And people are okay with people that say, oh, they went through this shadow work and they were violated in childhood, so they deteriorated into, I don't know, prostitution or whatnot. They're triggered when people are discerning that something was not them and they didn't go with it, and they're discerning that when they were tortured they basically weren't making a choice, and that there is no sex work that is not infant trade and trafficking. So there's no such thing as prostitution, there's no such thing as slut or whore. There is the topic of sexual boundary violation that can cause hypersexuality, but there is also the issue of people treating that hypersexuality, whether they were sex avoidance. The people can have hypersexuality and being sex avoidant, but also that they were violated just when they treated that hypersexuality. People are okay with people saying, oh, don't pay your taxes to these people. They are triggered when we denote that an infant that was violated needs to recover. They can't recover by getting a job, by being responsible, by all of these models of recovery collapse. They 9/11 on themselves, no matter how good they are above the toddlerhood level. People are okay with people saying, oh, sexual boundary violation is very terrible. The people, they are triggered when people speak up. And if somebody tried to silence them, they speak in the name of the person that tried to silence them. And they are triggered when people denote the fact that, yeah, at around the Me Too, when I was harmed and somebody was fairly complacent, they got a cancer in the throat, the other person got a cancer in I don't know what. Now, it's not their fault. They were violated themselves. The spark was about what is cancer, basically Jupiter's belief, and moon sign or cancer sign is basically the growth of cells. It has a Pluto issue, which is taboo. Jupiter is belief, and the moon or cancer sign is care. So they had wrong beliefs about care, and their inner child self sparked. So hey, that person speaks up. One of them even wanted me to, because I studied aromatherapy, wanted me to treat them and said, I'm only apprentice and I don't know how to treat a person who is within chemotherapy. I did not feel comfortable with